Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Dúchas Clonakilty Heritage, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening to our November lecture. But before we get on to the business of the evening, I would like to extend our best wishes to our chairman, Tim Fean, who is not with us this evening. He's recuperating after some knee surgery, so hopefully he'll be back among us very shortly. So as we welcome you to the November lecture, we approach Christmas, so we have a festive theme. Our aim here, of course, is always to provide lectures that bring diversity and cater for audiences that with varying tastes and interests. And I think we have been doing that up to now. So the title of tonight's lecture is Back to the Beginning, the Magic and Rituals of Christmas. And our guest speaker this evening is Lehane, Shane Lehane, sorry. Shane is course director of Cultural and Heritage Studies in Cork College of Further Education and Training at Tramore Road in Cork. He has lectured in archaeology, folklore, history and the arts for over 30 years and has developed a program of studies that facilitates both young and mature students to progress to arts and humanities programs at third level. Shane is well known for delivering educational and entertaining lectures on a variety of topics relating to Irish customs, traditions, beliefs and folklore. He's an archaeologist that has worked for many years in the Department of Celtic Civilization. In folklore, he has been the main motivator and contact for overseas students who wish to study various aspects of Irish folklore and mythology. In addition to being a prolific writer, Shane appears on many television and radio programs, exploring many different aspects of Irish folk tradition. He is a resident folklorist and a very popular one indeed on RT's Today Show, expounding many different aspects of Irish folk custom. Shane is also a very keen beekeeper and a strong advocate of Irish native crafts. So with that introduction, it gives me great pleasure to hand you over to tonight's speaker, Shane Lehane, with his presentation. Thank you.
I don't think I've ever been at such a technically adept lecture. There's cameras on me, there's computers on me, there's microphones and everything. So, and I thought I was driving into the Hilton rather than into a local historical society. But it's a really great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's just marvelous to have such an enthusiastic audience. I usually don't really want to acknowledge Christmas until at least it's December, so we're only one day away, so I think we'll get away with that. And if you weren't Christmassy already, I hope by the end of this evening you'll be running out the door singing Jingle Bells, because that's my intention. I gave this lecture first and foremost, I was just explaining to William, to the Cork Historical and Archaeological Society about 10 years ago. There was a guest speaker who was short taken, and they wanted someone in an emergency. And I came in and I just talked to them about Christmas traditions. And I was kind of surprised myself, because most of the time when you're talking about Samhain at Halloween, or you're talking about Bridget's Day or the fairies at May Day, we take Christmas very much for granted, and we never think about how many strange and unusual things we do at Christmas time. So this is a kind of an anthropological discussion. Much of what I'm going to say to you is going to be hyper familiar. You're going to be looking at me saying, we know all this. This is stuff that we do anyway. But my job is to point out the extraordinary in the ordinary. My job is to think about not so much what we do or how we do it, but the big question is, why do we do it? So I have to go through all the groundwork to get to that point at the end of this evening. I have loads of slides, okay, so you won't get bored that much. I love this time of the year. Some people do, some people don't. I love the way the weather changes. I love the bit of the cold that's just after coming in at the moment. This is the time for me. It's the time of the inside. It's the time for the fire. The time for the bottle of wine. There's a rugby match there in Musgrave Park tomorrow night, and we're kind of thinking, will we go or will we watch it on the telly? It's the inside time of the year. And this is a diagram I show my students all of the time. And it is sort of the period between, I think I can point on this, I'm not sure if I can maybe I can, but you can see over on the distance Samhain, which is Halloween, and I suppose Bridget's Day, which is coming up. We're in that period of hibernation, the dark time, the wet time, the time when we go to sleep, the time we, the dream time, as some people might call it. And it's within that sort of context that so many things occur. So first of all, it's the time of darkness. And it shouldn't surprise us at all that one of the major features of the Christmas period is the candle. Candlemas is the 2nd of February, but to be honest, if I was looking at a time when the candle comes into its own more than any other time, it's at Christmas. And there's something very special about the Christmas candle. We know that there would be a custom everywhere of lighting the candle and putting a candle in every window of every home and every house, ostensibly to guide the Holy Family on their way along the way. As Eamon Kelly, the great storyteller, would say, well, they were a long way off their track if they were coming past Ireland. But in any case, there's something beautiful and something lovely about the candle and putting it. That's my own house at home, and it's a kind of a tradition that when I go around to parts of Kerry and parts of West Cork, you'll see that it's something that people pride themselves on, and it's still part of the tradition. There was also then, of course, the great Christmas candle. The Christmas candle was usually brought in as a part of the kind of the settling of the money and so on in the huckster shops. You'd have gotten the old tallow candle. So the tallow candle was as thick as a spade handle and nearly as high in some occasions. The ones that we see now are only a small sort of version really of the older ones that were there, because this candle would stay lighting for the 12 days of Christmas. And the 12 days of Christmas, like, I'm amazed to see things. I saw a Christmas tree up before Halloween this year, and I nearly called the guards. It was just, but like my brother Rory, my lovely brother Rory, his birthday was the 15th of December, and we put our Christmas tree up on the 15th of December. But going along, Christmas actually didn't start until Christmas Eve. So on Christmas Eve and the 12 days bringing you onto Epiphany, that was the time. And you light the Christmas candle. I was the youngest in my house, so I had the privilege of doing that. And, you'd maybe wait till 6 o'clock till the Angelus, or maybe sing the Rosary on Christmas Eve, and you'd light the candle then. And it would stay lighting for the 12 days of Christmas. Shoved into an old earthenware crock with a bit of pollard or a bit of sand or anything like that, or a turnip or anything of that sort. But the youngest would always light the candle. They'd watch the candle for the whole 12 days, and it would never be left out day or night. It would still be lighting. And if it went out any particular day, they'd be saying, hold on now, January, February, does somebody want to die? No, in March maybe. And there'd be somebody else and it blew out. So they had all these predictions about the candle. Did it stay lighting? Did it not stay lighting? Did it last the whole time? So everything over the 12 days of Christmas, everything had a meaning, everything had a significance, and the candle itself had a huge significance as well. That's my own little granddaughter, Izzy. And I just love the wonder of that. I love the wonder of the candle itself. You want to keep the butt or the end of all the Christmas candles for 5 years. That was the tradition. And people would keep those candles, and they used to put great store in them, because it might be interesting now for any of you to revive this. This was a way of finding gold. And the way you found the gold, this lovely account here from the school's collection. Long ago, it was a great custom to keep the Christmas candles for 5 years. After the 5th Christmas, the woman of the house would go around all the fields and with 2 candles lighting, and wherever the candle would go out, there would be gold in it. There was a woman near Ballyvorna village, and she was going around with the candles lighting, and every step she would take, the candle would go out, and she ran the fast full of gold. She was for a whole week taking the car home, and she didn't find any gold, so she burnt the candles and she never believed it again. The continuity for me, which is really interesting, and we're talking to William there, I go down to Skibber, I go down, you'll still find, I think I took this photograph at Skibbereen in the lovely hardware shop there. This is a plastic candle, and it's on an old log, with a few baubles stuck on and everything. And that's the one you plug in, but it's the continuity. I don't care if it's modern or if it's old. I love that idea. And again, if we were to go to some of our near Scandinavian neighbours, the great St. Lucia, the great festival in Sweden and in that part of the world, celebrating the coming of light on the 6th of December in and around that time. So everything at this time of year has got to do with light. The other thing it's got to do, as you noticed tonight when you're coming in, I'm roasting, I had to take off my top. Okay, I don't know about you, you're all grand, but it's got to do with the cold. So if there was a time for the light, there's a time for the fire. And in Ireland, the hearth is really the centre of all the Irish houses. And this was the centre of the house in so many different ways. And at Christmas time, you tidied up everything. You'd scrubbed all the pots, you polished them off, and did all of that. You got rid of all the cobwebs. You went down to the lime kiln or down to get your lime wash, and you cleaned everything. You cleaned the chimney inside and out. Everything was prepared and done. Children, of course, were preparing for Santa Claus, so this was getting the chimney ready for that as well. And of course, the lime wash made everything lovely and clean and perfect. There was often the case that, the bit of soot at the back there, it was often the fellow would put his hand in that and he put a pint there on Christmas Eve. So that in and of it, that was a bit of effort, I suppose, to show that custom as well. But the chimney and lighting the fire, I think of all the times in the year when we think about the fire, it's at Christmas. We used to always, we all lived in one little room in our house growing up. We had no central heating, and there was the rest of the house was like a freezer with ice on the inside of the windows. And we were all comfy in the kitchen. But the only time we lit the fire in the good room was on Christmas Eve, was on Christmas Day. And that was a big deal. And I often noticed that in lots of garages now and things like that coming up to Christmas, there'll be fellas selling bags of truck. So the fire becomes a central part of everything. And that to me is a very primal, instinctual thing, to have the fire, have the light and so on. People often got the fire then, the chimney cleaned, I should say. So there's the old chimney sweep. You don't see too many of those anymore. And they were a big tradition, of course, in the past. But also people had the goose for Christmas. And when they were cleaning the chimney long ago, they'd often get a load of raggedy furs and tie it into a bundle, and with a rope they'd pull it up and down. That would be the chimney sweeping that went on. You wouldn't do it with holly. It was bad luck to do it with holly. But sometimes the last activity of the goose before he was plucked at all was actually he went up and down the chimney as well. And his flapping wings, of course, would dislodge everything. I don't think that's a custom we'll go back to. But this is the fireplace, this is the hearth. And turf, of course, is our great tradition. But there is a tradition, believe it or not, of the Yule log, as we would know again from our Scandinavian cousins. But in Irish it's called bloch na nulloch, the Christmas block, the Christmas chunk of wood, as it were. And before there was ever television, this was nearly the best bit of entertainment for the year. They were saving up this bit of wood. Sometimes it would have come out of the bog and it would have been dried out, and there would be little bits of turpentine in it and everything, and to be put into the big fireplace, spanging across the whole lot. Quite often just put out right in the middle of the kitchen itself, maybe a piece of vellum, a piece of ash, a piece of bog oak, and you'd bank it down with the turf, and you'd be pushing it inwards all night long. And of course there'd be spattering and hissing and, come quick, come in quick. So that was like the entertainment. That was like the Christmas film, and people would sit down and watch that all night. So that whole idea of the fire and it being central was huge. And this is me over the years. I know there's simple photographs, but it's really interesting for me to see, you could zip within a tin, and fire has been promoted even at this time of the year as a central tenet of the custom and the observances. It's also interesting that if you don't have a fireplace, and many places don't have fireplaces now, you can actually go onto Netflix now and click on to your own fireplace, and there's sound and everything that goes with it. And it's so interesting. It's my American students have told me about that's what they do in America on Christmas Day. They have the fire. So there's something within us all, going back to that, and I keep on repeating myself, but what I would call a primal instinctual observance that is within us. And holly and the ivy, probably the most underestimated aspect of what we do, in a way. And of course, we're all looking for the red berry holly. And there's all sorts of folk traditions, of course, about if the berries are there and if the birds didn't eat them all, it means it'll be a mild winter. You'll notice as well in Irish tradition, things are looked at as male and female. I can't explain this, even someone will have to do it, but the smooth holly is thought to be the female, and the prickly holly is thought to be the male. Okay, so but people would sell that again. I know when I moved into my own home out the country now, just my neighbour, the farmer, would come down and he'd present me with berried holly, and it was a kind of an honour, and he put that all over the house. And of course, we now have wreaths on doors and so on. These are all you see, all these things are so familiar to us. We never think about what we're doing. Long ago as well, they get the laurel leaf and they used to put the needle and thread and they put Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas up over the mantelpiece as well. By the way, and I could spend the whole night just talking about holly and ivy, but the interesting thing, the disposal of that was a big deal. You didn't just throw it out. Sometimes you fed it to the cattle, sometimes you burnt it and you used it as ash for other purposes. Often you held it dry, and particularly the holly, until Shrove Tuesday, until Pancake Night. And that was the intense heat that was underneath the pan then for making the pancakes. The tree then, of course, as we all know, is like the whole Victoria and Albert Association and so on. But bringing in greenery in the darkest time of the year, when very little is growing, that's the custom, that's the tradition. And of course then, what we're doing is we're adding the lights then onto that the fairy lights, as we call them, were originally candles. So you're getting the combination of all of those things together. This is an amalgam of so many other traditions that were there in the past, as I said. But I suppose we've got a bit modern now. And of course, now we're into the kind of the American side of things. But this is also lighting the dark. This is also the tradition of bringing a certain amount of chaos, a certain amount of carnival, a certain amount of different activities of that nature. This is creating magic, as I might say. So we create magic, we make magic, we go into a world which is hyper-reality, and we develop all of that idea. And then, of course, just to help us along the way, like in all rituals, there's usually a narcotic. In Ireland, it happens to be drink. So drink features massively. Of all the times in the year, when you think about drink, it's at Christmas time. We drink more drink than ever. This is one of my great old pals here, and I miss him very much. This is Pat Creedon. That was a bus driver who drove myself and my students around for about 20 years, and sadly passed away now. But I used to be at work, and I get an all knock on the door, and you're wanted. So I thought, what's up here? And there would be Pat, my buddy, in front of me, and he'd be looking at me and everything, and lovely rosy cheeks, and he'd say, it's very cold now, it's small talk, and he'd be looking around everywhere. And next minute, he'd pull out the bottle of poutine, wrapped up, of course, in the Examiner or something like that, and he'd say, that's for you now, and drink my health on Christmas Day. So I'll do that again this year. But there was never a time for poutine like Christmas. In fact, poutine was important for the cakes. It was important for all sorts of different things, and there was all sorts of stories about it. But it was almost a part of the ritual that was there. Just to let you know, if you do get a bottle of poutine, tell me about it. But the test is to shake it, and if the bubbles are slow and big, it's bad. But if they're small and fast, it's good. So that's the test. So this is my friend Michael Creedon. Michael has a shop there in the North Main Street, in the middle of the city. And I just put him in because Michael will do more business in the week or two before Christmas than he'll do for the rest of the year. So as a culture, and I know we have a stereotype of drinkers and so on, and the amount of alcohol that we sell is colossal. And again, I'm telling you about the what happens and so on. Later on, we'll discuss the why. Why does that happen? And again, my mother and everything, we'd have sherry, a glass of sherry or a glass of port. That was for the women. And then, of course, we have the hot drinks as well, the hot ports and the hot whiskies, all of that, and the Irish coffees, God almighty. In England, of course, you just coming right after the great harvest of the apple crop and the making of the cider, you had the Anglo-Saxon, the wassailing, the health, and they would pour their cider back into the roots of the apple trees. And again, there's an incredible amount of traditions relating to all of that. But the one thing I remember above all else, and I remember Christmas Day and my father at the end of the table, and we'd all take up our glasses, and this is a quintessentially important point in my little chat to you tonight. The toast at Christmas time was an Irish toast, which was Gemerri Bio Egan Amshorish, that would be all alive this time 12 months. So it wasn't just that people had drink, there was a reason for it, and there was an acknowledgement of a very important sentiment. Then, of course, Raza was another. Raza is me Daza. And I could go on about, we're now in Clonakilty, so I could talk about DC's and I could talk about Jennings making they're in back in Cork City in the late 1700s. I suppose a little step on from that, of course, was the Tanora, and that's become almost an essential part of the tradition as well. I'm very fond of, we often go back to places we went to. I love the Long Valley, of course, inside in Cork City, and most people coming back from anywhere, especially if you were in college, you would meet up, and you meet in the Long Valley for a spiced beef sandwich or something of that idea. And there's Humphrey and Rita and the gang. So there's these sort of preordained rituals that people have. But I also love the whole idea of, I worked in bars all my life. The reason I can talk non-stop and forever is because all the years I spent learning my trade in bars, raw mating with fellas. Anyway, but the point is that I used to watch fellas going for the Christmas, their Christmas box, and they'd start drinking in about 4 or 5 bars for about a week or two before Christmas, so they could just get one free pint, and it used to be nice, like they spend a fortune to get one free pint. The other sort of tradition that was big in Ireland, of course, was midnight mass, and it's a very strange thing. Midnight mass used to actually be at midnight at one time, right? We've kind of changed that quite a lot. And what was so interesting is that people loved in the countryside going to midnight mass, particularly when you'd go on foot or you'd at that sort of period of time. And the lovely lights that I mentioned at the window, they were absolutely fantastic. They were a vision. And one of my great heroes, and I'm sure you'll all agree, was the great Yaman Kelly. And Yaman Kelly's phrase, he says, all the little lights blinking and blinking through the dark, until, as the man above said, the earth below seemed a reflection of the starry heavens above. So I love that idea of the stars, and we're kind of drawn to almost that period of stasis and that notion of the cosmos. We look at it, we take time out. Christmas is about taking time out, and you begin it with that particular ritual that's there. So that sense of the starry night. But what I think is very funny is that you also had to go to confession on Christmas Eve, and the confession was early, 7 or 8 o'clock, and you were hanging around then till 12 o'clock. And there's, of course, all you could do was go in and have a half gallon of porter and more, and so on. And they kind of, the midnight mass was actually pure entertainment, as people were. And there's a great Tom Manelli, great folklore collector working in Milltown Malbay, recorded this from Junior Crean a few years ago. And Junior said, I suppose it's 10 or 12 years since midnight mass started off again, but there was no midnight mass for maybe 50 years before that. I think people used to stay too long at the pubs before mass. They'd go half drunk to mass, and the priests that time were awful strict and wicked. So you come in, they'd be flaming you with the smell of the drink a mile away. So I love that idea. But whatever your religious aspect and so on, one of the things that I particularly love about the Christmas period is the crib. There's something just incredibly magical about the whole idea of the crib. One of the reasons I'm attracted to it is my late father died He was an artist, and he used to make cribs at the Christmas period. So the backdrop that you see there, we were well used to seeing those sort of things, the star in the sky and so on. So I spend my life now going around looking at cribs because I'm enthralled by their simplicity of their beauty. The little infant, obviously, Mary and Joseph, the mum and dad, if you like. Well, it's a whole other story I won't quit. And particularly then, as a child, I loved playing with the donkey and the ox, the cow, the donkey. And there's huge folklore in Ireland about the crib and all of that sort of idea. And one of the suggestions, of course, was that how did the donkey get the cross on his back? Well, when our Lord was born Christmas night at the stable of Bethlehem, they had no bed, only a bit of hay and to sleep on in the manger. There was an ox and an ass in the stable. They had only a small bit of hay, and the ass ate some of it, but the cow refused to eat it. She kept her Lord warm with her breath. Ever since that night, the donkey has to do all the hard work while the ox has a fine life. It is also said that on Christmas night, the ass and the ox go on their knees on Christmas night at 12 o'clock to commemorate the night our Lord was born. So there was that great tradition of, the donkey going down on his knees. There's a tradition, the donkey bends his knee when the clock strikes 12 on Christmas Eve. I've heard of a donkey being brought into a house at 12 o'clock on Christmas Eve about 40 years ago. When the clock struck 12, he neighed, all laughed, and he was put out. The boy who brought him in cried to see that he did not do as well as expected. We're also told that all the animals get the gift of speech at 12 o'clock on Christmas Eve as well. So there's all this lovely magical sense of the animals and the crib. And I love the whole idea of the wise men coming and following stars. Like, it's a magical story. It's full of shepherds and angels, and what a brilliant idea. And we used to go around to over the Christmas day. We'd be dragged around to all the churches to look at all the cribs. And my mother was dragging bits of straw out of the crib, and she'd be putting it into her purse. And the tradition, of course, was that there was a custom in every town in which there was a crib. It is said that if you take a piece of straw from the crib and put it in your purse, you will never be without money. And let me tell you, it works. Well, I can tell you one thing, the tradition is alive and well, because if you went there around the 6th of January, it would be any bit of straw that would be all taken off. And this is me then, regardless of any religious dogma, affiliations or creed, the wondrous symbolism of the crib is a universal archetype etched deep within our psyches. The simple image of the birth of a small baby, comforted in the warm straw manger by a donkey and a cow, a mother and a father and a small cluster of well-wishers, all rejoicing in the miracle and the magic of the arrival of a new life into this world, is one of the great mythological conceits. It is perfectly attuned to the midwinter point of the dark, cold winter, when from the midwinter solstice at Christmas and the New Year, a new cycle of life begins again. And I would suggest to you that it's interesting that in the Irish tradition then, we have a parallel to this. And the parallel actually is on Bridget's Day. Because on Bridget's Day, we have the celebration of birth. And what we have is we have the young girls who dress up as the Biddy Boys. And the Biddy Boys bring with them a little breedog, a little baby. And this is the same tradition, in a way, slightly displaced, if you like. And the girls bring the breedog around. Here is Bridget dressed in white, give her something for her night. She is deaf, she is dumb, she cannot speak without her tongue. They've all little rhymes that they would have. But that little doll, if you like, is made from the last sheaf of the harvest. So the very last sheaf, which is known as the Chailach, or the old woman. And what happens is that what we're looking at is the seed, if you like, from the old year goes into the new baby, or the new life that's there. So that's that fantastic tradition. I think we've been making little effigies of bringing good fortune and good luck and so on. One of my favorite things is a thing called the Yule Bug. And again, this again is a Swedish tradition. And I was at a conference in Dublin there a few years ago, and I got the chance to see this fantastic figure. So this, in that part of the world, the gift giver is actually this little goat that comes along. And of course, being always mad to do something, I decided I'd make one, right? So very quickly, I got some old straw from my neighbours there. And of course, I had to put it into the bath. And by the way, there's my rubber ducky collection there. You can just squirt them out on the right. And I had to weigh it down, okay, it was soaked. I brought it out then and just did a bit of plaiting and so on, making a little tail on it, doing various pieces like that. And eventually it comes together, and I think, yeah, drying it out, that's grand, and then tying a few ribbons on it, and it's a grand job, yeah. So it was very funny. I brought that onto the telly there when I was doing that thing, and you man Tommy Fleming, the singer. Tommy's a super guy altogether. Like I said, forgetting I'm being recorded, you see, so I have to backtrack. But Tommy was, oh, where did you get that? And I was saying, I made it, why don't you make one yourself? So Tommy was really interested in that. Of course, I didn't notice then after a while what happened, it started to sprout. So I thought that was great fun as well. And but I put it up into the attic because I said that would be great. Now I'll bring that down again next year, and that'll be a bit of a talking point. And sure, then the mice get it and everything. That was the end of that. So very quickly then, we also have a number of what I call vernacular dramas or midpoint rituals. We dress up, we disguise. Actually, between Halloween, Samhain, and when we think about guising and disguising and going in straw costume, which is very normal, masking, right up to Bridget's Day. And in between, of course, we have the mummers and the Red Boys and so on. And I could spend a great deal of time in this, I won't, but I just, out of interest, just to let you know that the earliest account of any, what we call a mumming play, mumming, that comes from the words miming, and it also comes from the word rhyming, it's really got to do with a kind of an allegorical display. And the earliest account actually comes from Cork City in 1685, anywhere in the British Isles, which is kind of interesting. These are my students, my poor old students. I get them to do all sorts of math stuff. But anyway, here they are. We put on a mumming play one year. And here is the butcher, is a popular character. In addition to that, you have Diddly Doubt or Beelzebub. In addition to that, then you have things like the Larvaun, the White Mare, which you know as well from the Dingle tradition down the Ran. Usually these plays involve a battle between two characters. One would be a hero, like St. Patrick, for example, and versus usually it's Oliver Cromwell or someone of that sort. And when we did ours, we had a fantastic student play the role of St. Finbar. We thought he'd be much more influential than Patrick. And of course, the two of them fight away. They have a sword fight, and in the sword fight, one of them actually kills the other. So in doing that, then you have a death. And then what happens is you bring in the hero factor, the ritual organizer, who in this case happens to be the doctor, with a very interesting set of potions. And the doctor pours potion into the dead hero's ear, and they resurrect again. So in these mumming plays, you have death and resurrection all at one point in the year. You have lots of other characters as well. I'm whizzing through this on purpose because if I stop, I'll never shut up. You also have the Ran, going up the Ran. I really can't even say the rain. I couldn't say it, going up the rain. I have to say it as we say it. So Lehane or the Ran. And what's interesting about the Ran is that it's a small little bird, as we know, and that is hunted. It used to be killed, and it used to be put into a little holly bush, and people would go around looking for alms. And again, you were disguising yourself, you were playing music, you were singing songs. There was a whole degree of that. And of course, that's become incredibly popular down in Dingle now, as you would know. And my colleague in UCC, Aoife Granville, she has done her PhD thesis on the Ran and the John Street Ran, Shridoan Ran, the Green and Gold Ran, the different Rans that are there. And it's a whole chaotic and crazy sort of tradition that's there. So again, I'm only pointing out now we do this at certain points in the year, at points of division. We do it at Samhain, we do it at midwinter, we do it at Bridget's Day, we do it at the Mayboy tradition, we do it at the harvest dances, but we also do it at weddings and strong weddings, at points of ritual. And there's all sorts of different elements to that I probably won't just do now. One I will pause on for a moment is one of my favorite things. I just wrote a paper on this last year. A part of the world I'm very, very fond of is Portmagee, down in South Kerry, just before you go over the bridge to the Bench Island. And I spent lots of my youth in Portmagee and that sort of area. And on the night of New Year's Day, everyone comes out of the pub around 11:30 thereabouts, because down on the quay, people are lighting these torches. Now, in the past, they used to be sods of turf, dipped in paraffin and so on. There's a bit of health and safety going on now. They have a different system there now. But I don't know if I think it's a piece of video just. The value of an iPhone, let me tell you, for doing any sort of recording is great. In amongst all of this, they have an old man, the old years they call him, brilliantly attired. He's got a big long beard, he's got straw attached to him, which I think is very, very important. And he marches up and down the town, right going up around, 11:45, 10 to 12. And it's a great sort of procession, just absolutely magical. And the tension is building as it comes up towards 12 o'clock. So you just continues to march away, sometimes falling on the ground and so on. But just around 12 o'clock, which is really interesting for me, there is somebody comes out, and sometimes he gets shot, but not technically, he just gets shot, and he gets whisked away into a house. And this in anthropology is what we call a liminal time. And I just give you this definition, if you don't mind. In anthropology, liminality comes from the Latin word limen, meaning a threshold, a quality of ambiguity or disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a rite of passage, where participants no longer hold their pre-ritual status, but have not yet begun the transition to the status that they will hold when the rite is complete. During the rite's liminal stage, participants stand at the threshold between their previous way of structuring their identity, time, or community, and a new way which completed the rite established. So one of the things that's really interesting is that when this man gets shot and gets taken away, everyone's kind of standing around and they don't know what's going on. And there's that moment of pause time. There's that moment of standing on the threshold where everything is in a stasis. And then what happens is that just on the stroke of midnight at 12 o'clock, you get this thing going on. So what you see is, I don't know if you can hear it, I can hear it well, I'm sorry about that, but a young man appears, a young man with a bowler hat, dressed in a suit and tie, all dapper. He goes around and he shakes hands with all the men, and all the women, he gets a kiss, he kisses all the women and wishes them all a happy new year. So you get the movement from one to the other, from age to youth, from regeneration that goes on. So to me, that's a fantastic, fantastic tradition that we can look at. Okay, going to talk a little bit about Santa Claus and just being very cautious about some of this. But we've always had a figure who's been a kind of an avuncular, happy provider, if you like. This is the great god, the Dagda, in Irish Celtic tradition, Irish mythology, and he's the rejuvenator. If you want anything, you dip into the Dagda's cauldron and you get it. The other figures, of course, is Odin on his 8-legged horse, who goes across the sky and so on. Sleipnir is his horse. But people are very familiar as well with the figure. Most of our traditions go back to a figure of St. Nicholas and Myra in modern-day Turkey. in the 4th century. And he was really a very significant figure. And he is one who performed all sorts of wonderful miracles, saving, I think there were 3 children going to be put with his hands at one point in time, and he looked after them in a way. There was another poor man, and he was going to have to sell his 3 daughters into prostitution, but luckily Nicholas had a great trick of putting gold down the chimney in little bags, and when they had their stockings hanging up, the gold would go into those. So the whole tradition of hanging your stockings goes back to that. And in particular, St. Nicholas is the patron saint of pawnbrokers as well. And the pawnbrokers symbol of the 3 brass balls, if you like, comes from that sort of idea of the 3 girls being saved. And it's also one of the reasons why we have the most traditional present in Ireland in the past in your stocking was an orange. So the orange represented the gold ball that was there. So he was the magical gift giver, as you know. I'm not going to go into the whole idea, but they dug up his bones in a way, and they brought him to Bari in the south of Italy before they moved him further up into Italy as well. And then seemingly his remains made his way to Drull Point in Thomastown. And people in Kilkenny will tell you that St. Nicholas was buried there, if you like. But St. Nicholas, I suppose Santa Claus, is the malapropism then of St. Nicholas. We have the figure of Sinterklaas, and we have lots of different manifestations of that as well. And much of what we know about the figure comes to us from 1823, and indeed people like Charles Dickens, who would be taken as many to be the author of much of our traditions relating to Christmas. But I think one thing we should remember is that the Puritans got rid of all of the Christmas stuff, anything which was in any way outside Christian belief. And then with the Industrial Revolution, what you had is that you had the redevelopment of what we call Merry Old England. And the Merry Old England, this is the wonderful Daniel MacLeese's painting of the figure in the centre there. You can just see him with his long beard, who was Father Christmas, if you like. So the whole idea of having an avuncular, happy, rotund figure like you go, the redness, of course, comes in with the Coca-Cola and the popular sort of perspective. And there again are my 2 grandkids, Josh and Izzy, snuggling up to this fantastic figure. So Santa Claus fulfills a very important part of our psychology. This benevolent, smiling, rotund, long-bearded, gift-bearing, benign, loving grandfather figure who magically travels to each and every one of us on one night when we are asleep and leaves much anticipated and wished for gifts, often playthings, things, toys or luxuries, is a pure manifestation of our deepest needs, specifically when we are children. And I'm looking forward this year to Santa coming and all of those sort of ideas. And just the magic of Christmas morning when all of those presents come into being. He is not only the creation and the projection of communal psychological needs, but we're all active and willing participants in the propagation and perpetuation of this fantastical figure. He resides and exists in the communal conspiracy to consciously and actively manifest this figure in the imaginations and consciousness of those in their early formative years. We remember the excitement and the anticipation and so on. So I'm not going to progress with that any longer, but one of the things I would say is that we create the magic. We all manage the magic and make sure that it's part of all of that. PowerPoint here, I can find it. We're halfway through. Right, okay, don't worry, I'll speed it up a little bit for you. And I'll just go back into this one here, if I can. I was going to kill this, but I said, why should I, in a way, because I have a colleague who's Russian, and she was telling me that in Russia, their Santa Claus is a guy called Dave Moros. And I was looking at, and Dave Norris is a kind of he's very like Santa Claus, he just has a different colour outfit and so on.
He goes around actually. He's known as Old Man Frost, and he goes around with his I think he said his niece or his daughter or something of that sort. So there's this sort of as I imagine the Russian perspective would be. But I had Ukrainian students in the last few years, and they had Florence as well, and they would tell me about their traditions in that way, and here he is on the Ukrainian stamp as well. But there's another aspect to Christmas which we kind of have forgotten about, because in addition to this really positive guy, it's a rather awful good fellow who, to be honest, and he's known as Krampus. So I get some horrific slides, but I just whiz through again. But you remember, like, when we were young, we weren't always as well behaved as we are now. It was the lump of coal that we were getting. Okay, the lump of coal was like, and that was a great sort of deterrent for about 5 minutes, that we might be good for a little while. But there's that sort of idea that, and this is sort of on a kind of a new law and good stuff off story. But anyway, it's sort of the lump of gold is still there, and we forget that those parts of fortuity or I suppose what your reward will be is a part of things as well. Lots of different things. There's also been in Germany and elsewhere, you have the Christkind, who is an angel who brings the various gifts and items. But I want to really get onto this one because this is one that I'm really interested in. And that is, we have the situation now going to Santi. We never called him Santa, it was always Santi. And Santi was one thing, but we'd also go to Santi the town. And I was looking a few years ago, we had an exhibition on when did the whole concept of going to shop Santi as used to go. And it didn't matter whether we kind of knew whether, because he wasn't the real Santi, but we were going to get a present, so we were in this kind of semi-disbelief sort of idea. So we're looking back over the newspapers in Cork in particular, the earliest records that we had to Munster Arcade and to Grants in Patrick Street was to 1928 or thereabouts. And what I decided to do was that we had an exhibition of photographs of people visiting Santa. And I got all my students to send in all their photographs of going to Santi, and we put them up on the wall, and it was magnificent, and it was really interesting. Here's one of my colleagues, she was a Stephanie from Germany, so Santi there looked a little bit like a bishop or like a saint, as you would suggest. But in the shop Santi that we had, I have to say, some of them really didn't make much of an effort. And looking over there on the left, you can see that, and the Santi here, I think, is a bit too young for my liking, and so on. But when I looked at some of the photographs too, you have fellas going in short pants, and people didn't have money either, there's a lot of social history contained in these photographs. This is in Patrick Street there, just outside Woolworths, that was later on. That's the one I used. But look at the guy here, he's not making such a great idea. And then you, of course, the ubiquitous rubber ducky as a great present. And I love this one here on the left because my father not only did he do the cribs, but he also did the backdrops for the grottos. And we never had to queue up to go to Santi and we were kind of brought in. But that's actually the rocket, because that was probably the late 60s during the space race and so on. And that idea. Here's one, 1965. Again, another fellow who's doing his best. I think the next guy hasn't tried in any shape before to make any effort, And there was another gathering in Cork Distillers, and I'd say Santi had a few jars as well. But I have to go back to my favourite, this guy who really just scared for life, I have to say. But if you did visit Santa in town and you had your photograph taken with a shot of Santi, complete with a cotton wool beard, standing behind a half door and so on, You literally have a shared snapshot of innocence and suspended disbelief, fully embracing the magic all at one time in our lives, and all in the case of Santi at one particular time in the year. A photograph of any one child at Santa is a photograph of each and every one of our visits to Santa. It's a collective, shared emotion. And when you think about that, we all were that age, and we all had that belief, and we all had that wonder at that point in time. And I just think that that's almost timelessness. It's a time out of time. In addition to that, my great pal Tim Murphy, who I've worked with for many, many years, sadly now retired. Tim was a stage designer and had his own drama company and so on. And what we did that year is we put together a room, a typical room, with a fireplace, a television, a chair, and so on. The Christmas setting, or backdrop, this ubiquitous front room with its fireplace, candles, holly over the holy pictures, the Christmas tree with its wrapped presents, decorations, tinsel, television, the board games, the holly bulb, the carpet, and so on, is an immediate, recognizable archetype. Regardless of our newfound sophisticated modernity, to some extent, we continue to dress our homes, our nests, with the same recognizable paraphernalia. And I would suggest to you that that is something that you all immediately recognize. Usually rubbishy decorations that the children have made at school, but they're honoured, they're put together, they're there, they're brought out from the attic, little stupid things that someone made because they're a memory, and so on. Tim, I'm certainly not a slim member of humanity, but my buddy Tim is more rotund than me. I think usually it is Santa Claus as well, and we do that sort of idea too. I talk to my students a lot about Carnival. I'm not going to bore you with Carnival at all tonight. There are three features, according to the great anthropologist Peter Burke: emphasis on food and drink, on sex and relationships, and on violence and games. But one of the things I wrote about the Hollywood this year, just for a bit of fun, was what we eat at Christmas. And I find it really exhilaratingly entertaining to think about how much you eat in one day, okay? And I'm going to run through it with you now, and if someone could count up the calories, well, yes, I'd be delighted. It's interesting, before any feast, there always is a fast. There's a day of fasting. So Christmas Eve was a day for stockfish, and it was a day for what we call battleboard or bacula, and on the Aran Islands in particular, they have a type of fish wrasse, or in Irish called bollock, and the bollock are dried. They usually actually dried on the roofs of the houses that go, and they were dried coming up to Christmas. And then they put them in, even now today, all their relatives over in America, they put them into envelopes and they pinch them off, because it wouldn't be Christmas Eve if they didn't have the bollock. But then I'd be walking around, this is me in Limerick, I'd say, coming up to a rugby match, looking at all this meat, all of the grind meat. So Carnival, is a meat-eating feast. And that's what we do. And the one Carnival that you partake in without really knowing about it, myself included, is Christmas. And we usually have, as a centerpiece, we have a turkey. So the turkey was all important. People got all sorts of different turkeys. It's kind of you don't really eat a turkey any other time of the year. I guarantee you wouldn't be on a Wednesday afternoon saying, well, we have a turkey tonight. Because not only that, we have to stuff the turkey and we have to do all this stuff. So this is me with the turkey, cleaning it out. People don't do that anymore either. But the turkey is a centerpiece. It's a display. So this is not just food on a plate. You normally we'd open up the dining room, as we call it. We put out the best tent. We put out all the tablecloths. Everything would be put out, and the turkey would be brought in to the middle of the table. And of course, you'd have all the trappings in and all the different elements and parts to that. Some people would have a goose, of course. A goose is lovely too. So, but of course, just in case you didn't have enough, then you'd have to stuff the turkey, right? Just to make sure you had a bit of extra. And you had, of course, a bread stuffing, and you had potato stuffing. just to keep going you better have a bit of spice beef because you won't have enough in the turkey, obviously. And spice beef, of course, being a great part of the Cork tradition as well, available all year round. So all spice, that wonderful spice that's used in the giving it that particular flavour. And of course, the most traditional dish, along with the spice beef turkey, is the ham. So the ham is very good as well. And people who are vegetarians and vegans, everything, they have all sorts of other things. But in addition to those, then you have a few potatoes, and you have to have the roast potatoes, of course. And in case then himself wanted a bit of mash, you do a bit of mash as well. And then a bit of, you'll have to be a bit fancy then with the croquettes as well. And you better not forget, going out to midnight mass to steep the bones. Right? That would be another big part of the marathon beef. And then the miniature Brussels sprouts as well. And of course, people then would put on a few fancy terrina and kind of funny roasted stuff. And of course, the red cabbage is indispensable along with the cranberries. And I suppose you could make the gravy as well, just to go with that. And some people like a bit of bread sauce. Okay, so that's just it. But I didn't even do the wrong cocktail and the slice of grapefruit with the glacé cherry on top, right? But just in case you weren't hungry, then you'd have to start with the trifle, right? Because the trifle was, and that was okay. And got the Harvey's crystal cream floating around at the bottom of that, right? And then, if you were very good, you'd have a slice of pudding then, because you would be hungry, and that's before you launch into the Christmas dinner, right? With the icing and everything like that. And then you could just be clearing that off, then you might have a mince pie. And then when you finish that, something else would be an Irish coffee. And with the Irish coffee, of course, there's a chocolate drink. And somebody else brought out the snowballs, and everyone did a glass of Tanora. And this was just all day long, you'd be at the old, I suppose, I used to call them chipboard, but I don't know what you call them now. They were a different kind of sweet. And someone might have brought in the liqueurs, right? Because we were well used to that. And we started launching through the chocolates as well, and of course just the Christmas bag of potatoes. And we just finished all of that. And somebody said, would anyone like a snack? So my point really is that this is off scale, right? This is just, you do it, but you're not only, am I telling you about it now, but if you didn't do one part of that, you would say that's, we can't, why not do the marathon piece? Why can't we have the marathon piece? Even if you don't like Brussels sprouts, you put them on, right? So the whole point is that we are bound by obligation in terms of making every Christmas as identical as every other Christmas before. I think I worked it out at £5,240. That's just in the Christmas dinner alone. And I'm going to whiz through the seasonal requirements because I might not have time to do these. So they're just Christmas cards, and we can go back to those some other time. There are too many of them. There's new traditions we go on to, that's okay. Culture is brilliant, and my life has been looking at culture and looking at how things change. And I love new traditions. It doesn't have to be ancient, it doesn't have to go on forever. In fact, most traditions don't actually go back that far. But it's a sense of what you have to do. I'm very proud of the Holly Bowl. Actually, getting into the Holly Bowl is probably more difficult than getting into some big academic journal. Like amongst local historians, it's a prize thing to do. And in fact, some of the best stuff you can read would be in the Holly Bowl. My dad, he did the cover of the Holly Bowl, I think in 1959. Lovely, and I'm very proud to have a few articles in that. But people will often buy Ireland's Own. It's one of the times of the year that you might do that. Wrappers, of course, are another custom tradition, developed, of course, by Tom Smith. You know, when you crack the wrapper, that's meant to be the spark going off in the fire on the Yule log, and that was established in 1847, so they don't come back before that. And for a number of years, in my own place of work, we've been running a Christmas table quiz, and that's coming up again on Thursday the 14th. Christmas jumpers has become a kind of a very popular thing. And even my students were telling me that for the late I know now, everyone has to wear the same pajamas by all accounts. So there's all of these different things. And of course, you have Santi's Robin. So now, when we were being bold, not that it was that often, mind you, but my mother would say, Santi's Robin is looking in at you. And we'd see him outside the window, and he'd be going off telling on us, no, it's Elton on the shelf. That's the latest crack kid. And that drives people mad. There's certain Christmas songs, the old Jim Reeves Christmas album, I love that. I still play that on Christmas Day because that was the sound of Christmas growing up. My dad loved Leontine Boyce, beautiful, and you know, I still love as well Ronan Collins when he played Oh Holy Night. And I wonder if the new presenter will continue that. You play the RT guide, you might play it for the rest of the year. It's another kind of tradition. And you'd sit down and you'd watch the old Christmas film as well. That was another sort of big deal, whatever it might be. And then you get the annuals for another sort of thing, the Beano and all of those. The annuals are really interesting ones. You know, going back to the boys' own and so on, and your girls' own. Really, I have a number of these, and they're fascinating to think about, gendering and all the things we think about. But Carnival is also about turning Il Mondo Reverso, the world turned upside down. So we often do things that we should never do or imagine doing. So, for example, there's the Christmas morning swim, because we're doing the opposite to everything. And that's the sort of way or the tradition that's there. And there are sort of interesting things. I often listen to those ads. But we all, I suppose, post-industrial revolution, what was really popular, for instance, was the trade set. The trade set was a big part of it, and so on. The girls, of course, were getting prams and dolls and prams. So all that kind of thing is kind of interesting. When there was the collection of games, the compendium of games, the drafts and the Ludo, the snakes and ladders and tiddlywinks, all of those sort of things. People playing Monopoly. And then what's interesting as well, just on Stephen's Day, you have things like the long walk competition. So often when I was defining Carnival, I was saying food and drink and so on, but also a certain amount of competition or demonstration or who's the best or who isn't. So you had all of that. Even a lot of the derbies, a lot of the rugby matches, Munster will be on Stephen's Day. And again, you'd be on Daft as well for horse races on Stephen's Day. You know, so there's all of these sort of traditions. It continues to go on, of course, until Epiphany, which we would call Little Christmas. And it's a whole complex understanding of the 12 days of Christmas and the removal of 11 days out of the calendar at one point in time. But in one shape or form, on the very last day, the Little Christmas, or we call it Women's Little Christmas, or as we often say, Little Women's Christmas, right? But this is sort of the girls' night out. This is a time when, after the 12 long days, there is that sort of sense of abandon. But that's also the world turned upside down. And I'm not saying that in any chauvinistic way. I'm suggesting to you that this was purposefully that sort of idea, concept when the men would do what they ordinarily might do. I've learned a lot as well about the 12 months of Christmas and people dressing up. You can think about costuming and so on. And there's a lot of different stuff. There's her name's no longer with us now, and himself as well, who will be in the army. Okay, so to finish up tonight, okay, I want to just briefly go back to someone who I find absolutely fascinating and is the key figure who has almost explained to me what Christmas is or why Christmas is. And that is an anthropologist called Mircea Eliade. And Eliade has this fantastic sort of idea of the beginning. And he calls it inilo tempore, time, the timelessness of the beginning of the cosmogony, the beginning of everything. All of us are in this mystery as to who we are, where we came from, when did it all begin, how did it start, and so on. And his particular perspective, I think, is something that we experience every day. When we go to sleep in the evening, we become unconscious, and actually we're in a nowhere zone. and we are not really aware. And then all of a sudden, it could be your alarm clock, it could be the sun shining at the window, it could be the cock crowing outside. You wake up, and every morning you're awake again. You're in a new cycle, a cycle of the day. And we're also in the cycle of the year, because as we're coming up to the midwinter solstice, it gets darker and darker and darker, and it gets to that point. And we've recognised that in our archaeology. This is some of the early images of Newgrange, which all of you I'm sure are very, very familiar with. Just over the top of that area, and just here, just at the very top up there, Mr. Kelly in his excavations found the light box, and he found very quickly that the light entered into that on the shortest day of the year. And that acknowledgement, if you like, of the crux, if you like, of the planet, the way it moves, and the end of the cold period, or the movement into amelioration, into improvement, is absolutely huge. Lehane says ordinary historical time is profane time, ordinary temporal duration, in which acts without religious meaning have their setting. So you and I, we're doing our shopping, or we're walking around, or we're having a cup of coffee. That's profane time. But when we're repeating the deeds of the gods and other mythical beings, people can transform profane time into sacred time, and primordial mythical time made present. So I'm interested in ritual, I'm interested in how we enact a particular time, which is time out of time. And let me try and explain that a little bit. The most powerful way that people immerse themselves in sacred time is through periodic rituals designed to restore that connection as deeply as possible. The festival, and we're talking tonight about Christmas, is not merely the commemoration of mythical events, it reactualizes the event. While the ritual is being performed, the participants can shed their mundane identities and cares and become consubstantial with the gods, the heroes, and the ancestors of the myths. When we perform in ritual, we're not individuals anymore. We represent something else. I often think of, even if we were to take a religious ceremony like the priest and so on, the priest is no longer the individual. It's not about him, it's about the timelessness of what he's doing. And what I'm interested in quite often is, at this time of the year as well, which I find fascinating, not only have we the long shadows and we have heavy material like in Newgrange, but we often get the aurora at this time of the year in Ireland too. Lehane calls this periodic re-establishment of the time of origins the eternal return. It is eternal in two overlapping senses. It can be repeated indefinitely and returns one to an eternal mythical time that is always present, at least in a latent or potential state, behind one's experience of the ordinary, the profane historical time, and the terror it evokes. Time out of time, or the start of time. And I would suggest to you that every time we come to Christmas, and every time we come to the New Year, we go back to that individual point almost of our origin, who we are, where we come from, and so on. And it's all interesting to me, the sight of the aurora here, which to me is just stunningly fascinating. But I'm interested at New Year even. We create this sort of Big Bang. We create this sort of explosion of new life and of exhilaration. And think about all the imagery that goes within that. I was giving a rather risque lecture about champagne at one point in time, and I really can't go into any detail about it, but they have the same images and archetypes of regeneration and rebirth. Non-religious man, a sense of religious man, and whether he likes it or not, he also is the work of a religious man. His formation begins with situations assumed by his ancestors. Non-religious man can be formed by opposing his predecessors, by attempting to empty himself of all religion. To acquire a world of his own, he has desacralized the world in which these ancestors live. But to do so, he has been obliged to adopt the opposite of an earlier type of behaviour, and that behaviour is still emotionally present in him, in one form or another, ready to be reactualized in his deepest being. The irreligious still behave religiously, even though they're not aware of the fact, I know that's a very, very verbose little thing, but I'm saying, whether we like it or not, whether you think you're total atheistic or not, Eliade is saying is that this is primarily settled into us. So let me just illustrate now what I've been trying to get, not making a very good job of that, but think about it. Why is the fire important? Why is the candle important? Why do we go back to that little area? One of my favourite things in the whole cycle of the year is when the swallows come back. And they come back from South Africa and they go into my shed, they're there outside in the shed. And I just love them. They're just glittering and so on. That made us the beginning of the summer. And I cannot believe that they come back to my shed each individual year. And I think we have that in us all. I think that instinct. I think about the salmon. The salmon will go back up the river, they fight their way up, and then spawn. You and I forget that we're animals as well, that we have that homing instinct. This is an albatross. And I was watching David Attenborough, as we all do, one night. If that little albatross falls out of its nest, the mother will have nothing to do with it. But while it's in the nest, it will be looked after and so on. Here are wonderful penguins marching back, going back to look after their egg and so on. All of the effort of all of these to go back to where they originally spawned from. And my bees, my wonderful bees, if I move my hive, they'll all come back to the same place. They will all know exactly where to go. I think of the homing pigeons and their sense of returning always to base. So we think we're entirely different. Well, I used to live in Paris, and I remember saying to my boss, Argentinian man, telling us many days about the kind of 10th of December. I go, oh no. And he said, why? I said, because it's Christmas. And he was kind of looking at me, he said, but you're working here. I said, you know, it's Christmas. I have to go home. And like that time, there was nothing in my head. He could not understand how culturally, but instinctively, I was going to leave and spend a fortune of money to go home, to be home for Christmas. And, you know, we have this, that we just play this.
You all, and you are listening to Tuberty Live from Dublin Airport. Good morning, everybody. It's funny, all eyes are on the arrivals doors here as everyone's waiting patiently. I was great excited to see who's coming in the door next.
But without going through all of that again, it's amazing. And we've all seen the scenes, we've seen people arriving, and how much of a cultural sort of idea that is in that sense. And what's really interesting for me, I love the dawn and I love the dusk and those are ideas. But think about Christmas. The stage is set, the mise en scène made up of recognisable props. This is your own house and backdrops to find a liminal time and space. This Christmas is the same as last Christmas. It is unwaveringly the same. Preferably, it has the same cast members, those who are closest and dearest to us. This is the ultimate definition of home and family. Importantly, we've stepped out of chaos and uncertainty of linear time and created a haven of cyclical, repeating time. This is time out, magic, press the pause button or repeat button time. This is the liminal time, the time according to the anthropologist Victor Turner, that is so excitingly extraordinary, is a time which is sacred and magical, time characterized by the willful suspension of the normal constraints. It's a festive time of peace.
Thank you for a more engaging, viewers, entertaining, and indeed educational talk for Christmas. Throughout the talk here, I think Shane used the word magic on a few occasions. He's certainly brought the magic of Christmas back for a lot of us here this evening. Yeah. And I also want to say a special word of appreciation for the slide and the images on view. I think even without the spoken word, those slides and images would have portrayed Christmas to us in a very meaningful way. And having looked at the personal offer in terms of food and drink for Christmas, it's certainly quite enough the appetite. But the Christmas Day and maybe another couple. So through the script and the images, to use his own words, he turned an ordinary story into an extraordinary one. Well done, Shane.
Thank you very much.
There are two here who have maybe had questions or not looking at the Christmas, might like to learn a bit more about traditions. So if you have, I'd say Shane, you can.
I'm happy.
You have to answer the question. Yes, any hand up? Ladies first.
Wondering, is it a Cork thing to say highly bound instead of really? Because I said it in Dublin and they all said Bonnie don't do them.
I don't know. I suppose yeah, wreath to me is always a kind of a thing for a funeral almost, you know. Yeah. So but like you still say Christmas wreath, and you use that. But I suppose the publication of the Holly Bough magazine that's been going well over 100 years longer. I should know. I was actually invited the other day to the launch of the Holly Bough. John Dolan, the editor, I was delighted to go along, and I was thrilled, and I ran along in a way, only to find out I was launching the Holly Bough. So that was even more exciting. So I had to kick the touch in a way. But the Holly Bough to me is that magazine really as such, you know, that, and we'd still say Christmas wreath, and it wouldn't make a big distinction, you know. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but thanks very much for your talk. Fascinating, brought back lots of nice memories. The Marifat in particular. Just a couple of things that cropped up my mind as you're speaking about the various commitments here growing up locally. That in the 70s, people used to buy televisions, they used to rent them from the local TV shop.
Yeah.
And so here, those that were looking at put the black and white. But at Christmas time, a lot of people would actually go back to the shop and they'd rent for maybe a little before at Christmas. A colour television, there was a very possible use. We had the tradition of the shopkeepers like the butchers and the bakers giving their Christmas cake or their or something for the
Christmas box, yeah.
the Christmas box. And then the lads that were fond of going to the pub, not for a drink but for playing cards, you know, the Christmas Swiss prize or the 25 card race for the turkey was the big prize. And that would usually start around mid-September and there'd be eats and all that kind of stuff, was very interesting. And the other thing that I remember in my youth, and this kind of, I would talk to the other kids, but giving the dropping to the postman.
Oh yeah.
And we did our postman when I was in my youth, child in my youth. He traveled quite right to the post office. He did I think about 45 miles running around every day. Like. And of course, Christmas Eve, there was post on Christmas Eve, as most people remember. But on one particular Christmas Eve, I won't mention the name, some people know what I'm talking about. He did not too far from where we're sitting tonight, and we'll leave it at that. He went on his rounds, and of course, he was a pioneer for the rest of the year, but every Christmas Eve, he would be offered lots of the houses and buy kind of half 11 or 12 o'clock. He was very well staggering and the bike way up and down hills and things like that. But here I go one Christmas Eve night, or almost Christmas morning, that's why this was about midnight. Having started off at 6 o'clock that morning, you know, so he was now 18 hours on the road. So it was fairly slow, miles per hour, the record. And he know everyone, like, this were country roads, no lights, no street lights, nothing. And he had no clue, he knocked at our door, who was not long home himself, after being Charles. And when he talked to him, going on, sticking to that romantic girl who was fed, and he'd be careful in the bike. It's the little boat, the mini, and drive and the court and home.
Oh, fantastic.
That's a lovely story.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And they're great, aren't they? Those. And I was thinking about the television as well. You know, we were like we'd all sit down together that time. Like the film like was on, whatever the film was going to be, Christmas night. But you were talking about the black and white and colour. It was very popular as well. You remember that, there was quite often on like some of the bottles, you get the cellophane over the bottle of Lucasade or something like that, and you put it over the television screen then to give you a sense of colour, like you always like for a moment or two in it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lady here. Yeah.
Just one small point of information, Shay. I presume you knew that the code at the beginning from Sweet Buka is an ancestor of my Clonakilty.
I didn't. No, I didn't know that.
She's ancestor to
Wow, is that right? Yeah, that's that. My goodness, yeah. That's I didn't know that. That's great. No, and that's where they got the gold. So was it?
Shane, for one first off, indeed, it took us back, we old timers, 70 years and more, way back along. I was wondering there, Shane, a lot of the customs still, they're still around, certainly around Westport.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, what about the Irish diaspora from, we say, over the decades, when we say from after the famine, back to the US and to the Australia, notably, and also to Britain. Do the diaspora, do they still continue on with some of their inherent Irish customs, or have they become totally acclimatized and assimilated into their own modern day culture in the country?
Yeah, I would nearly say that it's gone the other way, that we're the ones who are taking on like the big, like Janie Max, I nearly, just like a spaceship landing sometimes when I go around the corner, that with my fellas having so many lights on, and they're doing it for charity and they're doing it for that way it works. Well, my brother lives in Australia, and he has to do it himself. His wife won't do it, but he'll still do the full Christmas dinner. And he lives in Perth, and they're in 50 degrees heat or something around Christmas Day. And it's the wrong thing to be having, but he still wants that and he keeps it. But it's hard to know. I've been to 32 different states in America. I've been very lucky. I've traveled all over different parts of America, and I met loads of Irish Americans. They have a very different, like, what is an Irish American? Or I'm rambling a bit, but I'll just go back. I first asked my brother when I went to meet him in Australia. I said, Barry, where are the Australians now? Show me some of the. He says, where are the Australians? And it was a kind of a lesson to me that culture and what we hold on to, sometimes we become more. I remember when I lived in Paris, like I was reading the Glasgow Island books and kind of, nearly smoking a pipe. Like I was more Irish than anyone. You become very conscious of that. So it depends on the personalities. But in terms of communities, then you get these real sort of almost, aberrations of culture. Like I suppose if you think about Kilburn and you think about Cricklewood and